Ready when you are.
We're going to get our hearing started. We'll call this hearing to order. Let the record show that Supervisors Cassiola, Fisher, Schifani, Igizio, and Barney are in attendance, in addition to Joe Seitz, our Township Engineer, Don Janus, our Township Manager, Jack King, our Assistant Township Manager, and Gretchen Moore, our Solicitor. If you guys have to give testimony, we have to have you sworn in. So could you please stand to be sworn in? You swear to tell the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the whole truth? Okay. Oh, yeah, you're an attorney. You don't have to be sworn in. I got it. Yeah, yep, they don't have to. Okay.
Supposedly, we already swore.
Once, right?
Right.
All right, it's a public hearing to consider, it's a conditional use application number 2024-0016, filed by Embassy Park Associates to modify the land use designation to include both residential and commercial at 6,000 Town Center Boulevard, Canonsburg in South Point, in the SD district. And it is a permitted use, so if you want to make any presentation first.
I just want to introduce myself. I'm Robert Ratcher. I'm representing Embassy Park. I have here with me a representative of Embassy Park. Many of you know him, Mark Kuntz. We have submitted numerous materials relative to the conditional use application, some drawings and other things. And one of the things that's in there that I think best describes and gives you the concept of what Embassy Park is trying to do is Mark's narrative. And he can certainly describe a lot better than I, and maybe answer your questions you might have relative to all of that. So I want to begin by calling him up here and letting him give you a description of what really, if you grant the conditional use, and of course the conditional use is just the first part of it. If you say yes to the use, then we have to come back in with a plan.
Or a site plan, right?
Sort of, yeah, and give you like a 1,000-foot view instead of the 50,000-foot view. So I'm going to call Mark up and ask him to speak to the details of what's proposed and why.
Okay. No.
This plugs in that? Okay. Hey, good evening. Yeah, Mark Kuntz with Embassy Park Associates. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming early tonight to hear our conditional use application. As Bob mentioned, we're here this evening to seek conditional use approval for our Embassy Park office building located in South Point 2. I'll go through this real quickly. As Bob mentioned, we had a pretty detailed narrative that talks about the project and the reason for our request. But just to familiarize yourself with the property, this is Embassy Park. This is South Point Boulevard. This is the Consol headquarters. It's the 3-story office building, or red brick building, across the street. And this is Town Center Boulevard here. Embassy Park is a 3-story, 130,000 square foot office building. It's actually 2 sister buildings that are connected by bridges on the second and third levels. This is a zoomed in picture here. Again, Town Center Boulevard, Consol's on the right-hand side of the page. But you can see they're 2 basically identical buildings, and these are bridges that connect at the second and third levels. In the middle of this is a courtyard area that was developed. This building was actually originally, we developed this here in like the 2008, 2009 timeframe during the kind of the great financial crisis. It was originally meant to be a single, much larger footprint building, but due to financing at that time, we weren't able to get financing to build the building. The bank asked us to build it in phases. So as we get here tonight, the reason for our request is we want to convert this building into apartments. We still want to keep some component that will be office, but a large majority we want to convert to high quality apartments. The thing that we found here, which is maybe fortuitous and lucky for us, the original plan for this, which the bigger footprint, really would not have been very conducive to convert to apartments. Being forced at the time, although it was quite challenging to kind of rephase our plan and come up with a new concept, it ultimately created smaller wings. As we look at it today here to convert, it's a much better position for us. There's a lot of exterior glass at the building. All the units can have glass, as part of their bedrooms and living rooms as part of it. So we're here tonight to kind of take the first step in the project. Again, this was developed as a commercial office building. If you're familiar with your code, all of South Point is part of the Special Development District. And in that district, although it's mixed uses, it allows office buildings, it allows hotels, it allows recreation, golf courses, ice rinks, it allows industrial properties. You designate your property as one of three things: your residential, your commercial, or industrial. So when Embassy Park was initially developed, it was identified as a commercial property because it was a commercial office building. We're here tonight just to seek your approval to amend that land use designation from commercial to include both commercial and residential going forward. And the reason for the by use is we have a co-working brand called Loft Office Suites. It's on the first floor of this right-hand building. We're intending for that to remain. Those are small companies. Those are people that have one offices that kind of work by themselves. They work kind of like work the gig environment. We think that that's very conducive when we convert it to apartments on the other floors. Those are the same type of people that use that space. So that's why we're seeking kind of the hybrid mixed use on it. We went through again in the detailed narrative that was provided. Going back, Tom, you'll remember this. South Point in the 80s was developed as a live, work, play community. The ordinance was drafted around that mixed uses. And if you go through, I'll read these real quick here if I can. The statement of intent in the SD district to allow flexibility in design and the application of zoning regulations to encourage the economic development of a special district where the creation of a coordinated living and working environment can be accomplished. Still where we are here today. Number two, to provide incentives for the public and private investment in the coordinated and orderly development of large sites with special development characteristics. The third item, to respond to demand for a special district which can accommodate a variety of uses in an area adjacent to a federal highway interchange. And fourth, it's maybe the most applicable to where we are here today, to provide a procedure which can respond to changes in market conditions. And that's what we have. Post-pandemic, the office environment has changed. There is significantly less demand for office space going forward. We see it in our buildings. We see it in leasing activity. It's something that we talk about as a company on a weekly basis. So we went through our whole portfolio and looked at what is the most appropriate building to convert, and Embassy Park kind of fit all the requirements for that. So that's really what led us here tonight. Again, as Bob mentioned, as we move forward, this wouldn't be the last time you would see us. We just need to know, hey, we would have the ability to have the use as high-end residential apartments. We have further study to do. We have further plans to do. We would be back in front of the Planning Commission and the board here tonight for site plan at a later date. Again, I'd be happy to go through any more of the narrative if you'd like me to. Again, in regards to the project, we've looked at it conceptually. We think it could support maybe 100 to 120 apartments. This isn't going to be a 300-unit apartment building. It's somewhere around 100. Again, that center core of the building, we would try to keep that, again, as the social spaces for it. We have to introduce a clubhouse. We have to probably introduce a pool. We have to introduce some of those other kind of social spaces that tenants will require for it. So we have work ahead of us here to do. And again, our intention is to be back in front of the board, knowing that we would have the land use change here as part of the project. They range, we think, from anywhere from 700 square foot to maybe just shy of 1,000 square foot. They're very comparable to the apartments. If you're familiar with 1400 Main, the apartments on Main Street, they're similar in size to those apartments. Yes. That building has a waiting list, and that's a great property, and we think there's significant demand here in the market.
Bob, do you see an issue with our land use categories in South Point are residential, commercial, and industrial land use? They're land use categories, they're not zones. So I know there's a description for land use category of residential and a separate one for commercial. Are we able to combine this, in your opinion, to, it's almost creating a mixed category, because like the mixed use category of residential is Ironwood and Fairways Landings and apartments, then we have the commercial areas, but this will be almost like a different category of an actual true mix. And we're not against that, I'm sure nobody on the board.
Why is it
think
a
it-
mix? Because it has office space in it still? Is that why?
Well, but there's no mixed category like that. There's either, every parcel was designated as either residential land use category, commercial land use category, industrial land use category. There wasn't a mix of the categories.
You had to be one of those three as opposed to being able to be more than one,
But you would
maybe
be
two in a particular
going,
property.
you would be going from commercial to residential, so you would just need a change in land use
No,
category.
no, but they want to keep some commercial,
Well, there
which we
would be
would.
some office.
Oh, that's what I was asking.
Or is it sole use?
There's a list, it's in the book here. While you're talking, I'll pull it out real quick.
Because if it's primary use,
It
it's
doesn't.
Yeah, if it uses that
fine.
word.
If the primary use is switching
I,
to
I,
residential.
I doubt that it says those words, though.
Would
I
the game
think-
plan be
I think
to-
the statement of intent, and I know it's just a statement of intent, but I think it was originally perceived, and probably by people a lot smarter than I was, because I certainly didn't see coming what has happened with the office market all over the country. But I do think that it gives you the flexibility to go in and say, okay, we can have those two together if we think it's appropriate. Certainly gives you control over it with the other controls you have in your ordinance.
I mean, it happens a lot of other places, and honestly, I'm
Yes.
surprised it took you guys this long. No, I'm not saying, but like, I saw this coming over the past
Yeah,
couple years.
right,
Like, it was only a matter of time before we're gonna have to start converting some of the office space into something else.
Is the game plan to separate by
Every office development in America is looking at this situation. This is not unique to South Point, it's not unique to Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. This is every office market.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you Google this, if you Google, they put in the right keywords, it's all over the country.
Yeah.
And it's what all the, in the magazines that deal with development and architecture and things like that, it's what everybody's talking about right now, because it's the new thing. On top of what happened in, back in the pandemic, which was the first taste, I think, that everybody got. The other thing that's happening is that, and I was just talking to Carol out in the hall, we were talking a little bit about all this, and I said, younger people now, the younger generation, they want to live and work in the same place. They don't want to travel like many of us do. Work in one place and live in another place. They want to have like a place within, a block of them, or really right downstairs or upstairs or whatever. I'm getting up there and I think that's kind of crazy, but that's the way the younger people think. And the other part that goes with that is the residential piece. They want amenities. They don't just want to rent a place, they want to have a pool there, they want to have a gym there, all that kind of stuff that, we would think is, well, we really don't need that. Well, they really do think they need it, so I think it is the future. And I do think you have the flexibility in your ordinance to undertake that.
I think we have the flexibility to add a category, an actual mixed category, but I think, Gretchen, we're reading this, the commercial land use category has no provision for any residential at all.
So I would answer you this way then, we're willing to work with you in any way you desire. You want to be comfortable with your own rules and regulations, that's a good thing. So we're willing to work with you in that regard to make this a reality. I think conceptually, you're not opposed to the idea, but you have a concern about what
Right,
the
we'd have to
text of your
amend
ordinance
that,
is.
yeah.
I think the change needs to happen anyways, because I don't think you're gonna be the last. You may be the first, but I don't think you're gonna be the last business or office building wanting to do this, and we have to come up with a category. Because we also don't want South Point to sit empty, because nobody's,
Pool buildings are worth a lot more to the owners and a lot more to the township in terms of taxes, so way to do that. And I think as long as you control the
So this has to be
quality of
amended.
what's being put in there, I don't think it's something that creates a problem for the township.
is the plan to split by floors? Like to have the first floor commercial, second floor residential is,
For the most part, yeah, so the first floor of this right-hand building, which is one of the closest to town, that would be the one that has the co-working office suites. The back first, and all the other floors, so this entire back building would be residential, and the upper second and third floors of this building would all be residential. So because there'd be 5 different floors of apartments and 1 floor of the co-working suites.
But I'm saying we'd have to change their land use category to residential.
In the total building too, there's probably,
But co-working is an
10.
office space, that's
total
different.
businesses
That's,
in
to me,
one
that's
building.
just an
Mixed use.
amenity within residential.
Well, that's a good thing.
We
too,
look
is it
into
just- are these just
2025, if you
amenities?
took out our co-working
ask that
space,
Residential or-
that building will
Well,
be
that's not
maybe
Let me ask that question.
60%
Yeah, it's
vacant,
not.
maybe 70%
It's not
vacant.
what?
It's significant.
It's not an
And
amenity.
that's
Like a
the
beauty
reason we're
shop for
here.
the residents.
Yes, it is, because you can only go there if you're a resident.
No,
I will.
there's buildings
Can
that are
I
doing
ask-
quite well if they have all the right amenities with them in the size and scale, and there are certainly buildings that are quite challenged.
Can I ask this question? So in figuring this out, if it is just a co-working space, would it be just a co-working space for the people that live within that building, or would anybody be able to
Not
access it?
necessarily. I don't want to commit to that. I mean, there are third-party people that are using it today that likely would be there. We do think over time, those apartment residents will predominantly use that space, and maybe fast forward 5 or 10 years, it may be that entirely, but not going into it, as part of the first turnover.
Okay, because that would be different, because that's, if it's just for those residents, then
I would agree that's probably.
that's an amenity for those
But
apartments.
in order to do it right, we'd have to amend our land use categories. And I think the board showed they're willing to do that. We want to do it right so you don't get balled up in some legal technicality, or we don't. So I think if, at our meeting tonight, it's on the agenda, I think we'll talk about that we'll basically authorize the plan that you're doing, but that we have to take a first step in changing amending the ordinance. And it's a simple amendment to the ordinance, so it's not like we're going to have long dragged-out hearings or anything like that. So we'll commit to getting on it, having a hearing for them. I know, Gretchen, it's pretty simple. We can write it up and get a hearing scheduled, and then you're on your way. But
I appreciate that. I would just ask, though, I mean, as part of the conditional use that we're here tonight, don't you as supervisors have the ability to attach conditions? And I guess, don't you have the mechanism to approve both the commercial and residential land use designation conditioned upon submission of final site plan at a later date? And that's how you can.
No, we're not at that step yet. I mean, we have to get it, you can proceed with that work, and we'll let you have simultaneous applications, but we have to get on this to amend these two.
But he's looking for some sort of assurance
Well,
that
that's what
we're
I'm saying,
okay with
we'll
it.
put something in on our motion tonight.
Tonight.
At our
It can
meeting.
get approved,
No.
but we'll just have to let the public know that we'll
gonna be
simultaneously
modifying.
change it.
Subject to some
Yeah. The
modifications.
contingency would be the
Yeah.
amendment to the ordinance, but I think what you're asking for is primarily a residential use. You want to switch to residential, and I think within the residential use category, what they'll do is just have, an office space adjacent
Something like that.
residential.
Okay.
Something like that, but you're clearly primarily a residential now, or want to be.
Primarily would be, that's correct.
With like a, yeah, so I.
But the land use category is commercial, so you're also asking for us to switch your category to residential, and there'll be that office component in it. We'll add that as part of the amendment. That's simple enough?
Yeah, I think so.
At this point, yeah. we've
Darlene,
gone-
can you talk into the microphone per Jack?
Okay.
Jack was yelling at you, I just relayed that message.
Is this the only building you have in the township, or do you have more?
So we do own, yeah,
I
we own
mean,
about
South Point.
13 properties in South Point. Again, earlier, maybe I didn't get enough detail. We've gone through and done like a complete assessment of all the properties that we own. And again, we kind of find that some of the building, the footprints are just simply too big. You have apartments around the outside, and you have all this inboard space that there's nothing to populate it with. Or you have buildings that are simply just too small to convert. If it's a 40,000 square foot building, you can't convert it, you can't afford to put in a swimming pool, plus all the other amenities that only have like 20 apartments. So you have to find these buildings that are smaller footprints, that are in this mid-size, shape. And again, in our portfolio, as we see it today, this is the only building that we think was conducive to do it. Doesn't mean that someone else couldn't afterwards. I don't want to, as you know, anything, obviously, there's something other people could look at with it, but in our portfolio, we see this as the one that's most appropriate for it.
Yeah, it might benefit other businesses, this adjustment to the ordinance. Okay, any other questions from the board members? Anybody in the resident or audience who wants to ask any questions about that proposal that you've just heard? All right, if there are no other comments, then we'll declare this hearing adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's, they're way down on the fourth one.